Hello, my name is Darren Thomas, and I am the Director of Educational Research Techniques. In this particular video, we're going to be going over some tips for lecturing, and this applies in particular to people who work at the university level per se, college, university, etc. So let's see what we can learn. So we're going to go over 4 main points in this particular video. When is it appropriate to lecture? How, preparing your own materials, focusing on the presentation, and of course, watching the audience. So let's look at these. So when should we consider a lecture? Now we know that lecturing is a primary mode of content delivery at the university level, and it has the challenge of being really boring for students. You can't get around that fact because it's an example of what we call passive learning, where the teacher is active because they're sharing content, but students are receiving it through, listening or maybe reading if they're reading a book. And this is passive for the student. So when the student is learning in a passive way, it is often much more difficult to be engaged. But like I've already said, there are times where it may be appropriate. So the first bullet right here you can see is like when you have a lot of content and very little time. So again, how much is a lot? It really depends on the field you're in, the level of the students, etc. But if you know from your experience that you need to move through a large amount of material for your discipline, and you have a short amount of time for that amount of content, lecturing might be an appropriate tool to get through that content for the benefit of the students. And again, how much is a little bit of time? It depends on the field, the background of the students, your skill set as a teacher. How much is a lot of content? Again, same criteria. We cannot define that in this video. Now, for the second bullet, another time when lecturing is very, very appropriate may be, again, when you're going through complex information. So something really, really technical where, plays and skits and discussion might not work, and or when you are giving instructions. So the example I like to give the teachers that I might train is you don't want to do discovery learning for safety skills, safety directions for, a science lab. Students need to know from lecture, what are the rules for safety, how to do this, how to do that, period. And then they go on to execute. You don't want them to figure it out on their own. There is a time for discovery learning, but not for when learning about safety. So if the material is complex, again, it is your judgment call as the content leader of your classroom to determine what is complex and what is not complex. But when it's complex and or when you need to provide a lot of instructions, lecturing may be a primary tool in those situations. Another time where lecturing might be very beneficial is when you're dealing with new material. When something is new, students are already going to struggle because they're not comfortable with that content yet. So you might want to just get them through the content that first experience passively, so that they have some idea of what is going on before they're actively trying to learn something. Again, this is really at your discretion as the leader of the classroom, but this is another avenue in which lecturing may be an appropriate tool. Now, you have to remember something is that lecturing is not really a problem unless that is the only pathway through which you are providing content to students. We have to understand that students have to learn things through multiple pathways. They've talked about this in learning theory and in more complex subjects, but they have to learn things actively and passively. It has to come through their ears. It has to come through their eyes. They have to learn it kinesthetically also through movement. And so the more different avenues that you can fire through as a teacher, the easier it'll be for students to not only become familiar with content, but to take ownership of it and to be able to do something with it. And that is how it works. And so lecturing should be that first step and not the only step in students acquiring knowledge about a particular subject so that they can act upon that knowledge. So we often have students not only go to the lecture, but also we have them read the chapter that the lecture is based on. And then we have them do assignments, writing assignments or presentations. These different activities are for firing different pathways inside the mind to help students to acquire the content and become an owner of it and not just, a customer or someone who's just passing through the learning experience. Now, Another thing that is important is that you want to, whenever possible, to prepare your own materials. Many textbooks nowadays, perhaps maybe all of them, they come with PowerPoint slides, they come with websites, they even come with assignments sometimes and questions for exams. And these are all beneficial things. However, you want to develop your own material because you want them, it's easier to follow it if it kind of comes from your own approach and your own thought about it. That's one thing. And so when you're more comfortable with the content, then hopefully your presentation will sound more natural and not artificial. So you want to be able to move through the content in a comfortable manner. And the easiest way to do that is through having your own materials. Now, you can take the materials from the textbook, the website, the PowerPoint, and modify them. That's also appropriate. But if you look at the third bullet here, your own content equals your mastery of that particular topic. Now, of course, as a teacher, we know that you're already a leader in whatever you're doing. However, you need to make sure that you have ownership of it through sharing your learning experience of that content. And that allows you to teach and to present things in a much more natural, flowing manner. And one of the more powerful ways that you can help to bring in your own material into the classroom is through sharing stories about these things. So whatever your topic is. So if you're a teacher and you're training people to become teachers, you share stories about teaching to illustrate classroom management, or to illustrate, how to give an exam, or to illustrate, what not to do, some of the mistakes you made as a teacher. As students experience these practical examples of these abstract concepts that are often presented in the classroom, it helps it to become real for them. And they have a better understanding of it because they can see from your experience what these ideals look like in the real world. Now, something else that's very, very important here when you are going through it using lecturing is, of course, to focus on the presentation. So you don't want to get into the habit of reading long, boring passages. Now, this might seem incomprehensible today, but even I had several teachers, going through school who would actually sit down and read the textbook out loud to us. Now, you can take quotes here and there, but you have to understand once you get beyond, maybe the third sentence, people start blacking out. I don't have scientific data based on that, but I'm just telling you from experience, mainly as a student, we begin to get lost in the sea of words, And so as a teacher, you want to avoid reading long passages. It's better to, again, more of an improvisational, extemporaneously manner to paraphrase ideals from the text. So you can say the author says something similar to this, or the author says something like that. And by flowing through it naturally, it is easier to engage the students. And if they read the passage, they're going to try to compare what you said in the paraphrase to what they actually read, and you'll often see them shaking their head in agreement. In other words, this is a way to engage them by paraphrasing ideals from the book. Students who actually read, which of course that's not very common anymore, will become engaged because they're comparing what you just said to what they actually read in the textbook. And honestly, if you misquote, they'll tell you, well, that's not exactly what they said. And again, maybe you don't want to be corrected like that in front of everybody, but if they know that it's a little off, again, it shows engagement. And the biggest challenge with lecturing is maintaining engagement. And so the second bullet here, I've already kind of talked about this, is that you want to share the content naturally. So more in a conversational style where you're very comfortable with it, and you're not just reading bullets from a PowerPoint screen or reading ideals from a textbook or just trying to follow your notes or whatever, but you're very, very comfortable with the content. That is where preparation really helps out a lot, because again, it's your presentation now, not the publisher's, and you're able to move through it naturally. And also that's where paraphrasing comes in handy as well. It's a sign of your ease at not just knowing it, because we know you know it, but being able to share it in a natural, stress-free manner. That is much more challenging. To make those complicated ideals simple is something that is very, very difficult. Also, you want to demonstrate positive body language. Again, this is like a basic ideal towards teaching. You want to make sure that you walk into the classroom with energy, standing up tall, looking people in the eye, moving with authority, having confidence. People feed off of that. And, sometimes some teachers, they're really, really bad with content, but they're just so comfortable. They're so confident. They have so much energy in the classroom that they're able to move the students with them, even though they have no idea what the teacher is saying. So that ability to project authority and confidence goes a long way in helping students to hopefully understand what you're sharing. Now, something else, you don't want to just become obsessed with your presentation to the point where you don't see the audience. Many teachers, especially newer ones, they're so focused on their PowerPoint, they don't even pay attention to their audience. They have no idea if their audience is even paying attention to them because their goal is to get through content. However, not only do you need to keep track of what you're saying, you need to keep track of the audience and the reaction to what you're talking about. So you don't want to ignore them. And as you look at the second bullet here, you want to check for engagement. What are they doing with their cell phone? If they're playing on their cell phone, they're probably not engaged. Are they sleeping? This is a common problem at universities. Are they talking and whispering? Are they getting up and going to the bathroom frequently? These are all just some signs that, what you're sharing is something they're not paying attention to. Are they slumped over? Are they taking notes? Are they on their laptop or whatever, looking at something else? These are all things that you have to wrestle with when you are trying to share content as a lecturer before your students. So if you start to see some of these signs, sleeping, talking, going to the bathroom, whatever, falling asleep, you need to make adjustments. And so what I like to do, and again, this is not scientific, is I like to break up my lecturing into little 10-minute segments. So, 8 minutes of talking and then about 2 minutes of an activity or some sort of a break or transition. And the rationale behind that is coming from, television. Often a television show that's like 30 minutes, say like your typical cartoon, it'll have about 8 minutes of, action from the actual show. And then there'll be about 2 minutes for commercials. Again, this is not scientific. This is just from personal experience. And so people at the most can probably pay attention for about, 8 to 10 minutes at the most. Then their mind starts to wander. They need a short break because, if they're in university, they're 18, 19, 20 years old. They've been watching cartoons for about 18, 19 years. They're trained to think and to handle their life in 8-minute segments. That is just the reality. And so what I do is I talk for my 8 minutes. And then when they start to slip away, I give them some sort of an activity. So maybe we take a break, or if you look at this first bullet underneath activities, I might have the students discuss something. I might ask the class a question just to kind of break up the monotony of one person talking. I might have the students solve a problem related to the material. Or if they're really starting to struggle, I might have them get up and talk to someone on the other side of the room. So my first strategy is often to have them talk to their neighbor. And then, if that's not enough to get them re-engaged, I might say, hey, talk to someone on the other side of the classroom. And so this might be a longer break, say maybe 5 minutes. And so they get up, they walk around, they talk to someone else, and then they come back to their seats. Maybe I ask them a question while they're away from their seat. It all depends. But these little breakups that you put into your lecture can really help students to, reconnect with appreciating what you have to say about that topic. And it doesn't take up a lot of time. And a matter of fact, you gain time because by giving them these little mini breaks or whatever you want to call them, they're able to digest more later on. That's some of the benefits of this. Now, to wrap up this presentation, I just want to talk about some of the things that we learned here. We learned about when to lecture. We learned about preparing your own materials, the benefit of that. We also learned about how to make sure you focus on the presentation. And lastly, we learned about how you need to watch your audience and make adjustments accordingly to their engagement level and some of the strategies for our activities that you can use to help to re-engage your audience. So my name is Darren Thomas. I am the Director of Educational Research Techniques. Thank you very much for watching, and you take care.